So the long-term goal is we want the garden to take care of itself. A couple zinnias growing in this hibiscus that I'm going to also transplant. There's a lot of relocating that needs to go on in regards to plant health. Now, it's okay for the cosmos to grow behind other stuff, but not in front of it, especially not among this establishing verbena. So I'm going to transplant a few of these little ones over there in front of that grass and maybe further on down. So this whole back fence gets a little splash of that color. When it comes to deciding how to distribute your volunteer annual plants that are popping up throughout your garden, and if they're popping up among other perennials or other annuals, it's not good to just ignore them and just let the best plant win. The first goal in mind should always be to protect the perennial. If there's an annual seed that you desire, such as Zinnias or Cosmos, coming up through the middle of a perennial, such as a hibiscus or a lantana or just some other desirable perennial that you have, always prioritize the perennial. You don't want to uproot the perennial and move it in the middle of summer. But what you can do is strategically relocate those volunteer annuals to better conditions where they're not going to compete with something else and where you can still enjoy them. We're just getting into the summer season. I'm already in April, and this is the soonest I've been able to get to this. But throughout the growing season, this is something that you have to keep an eye on, because as much as you want to keep every single bloom and flowering annual that comes up on its own and volunteers, the sooner you can get to them and relocate them to a place that they won't compete with another plant, the more chance you'll have on being able to keep them and enjoy them the rest of the season. So the idea is you want to encourage those self-seeders to come, but at the same time, you have to make sure where they happen to pop up, because Mother Nature will kind of distribute them, and is to take note of them and then move the plant that doesn't need the advantage. So over here, there's a hibiscus where some self-seeding zinnias have popped up. So I want to make sure that I don't create any type of competition or condition that would be a disadvantage to the hibiscus. So I'm going to be removing the zinnias, overtaking that or even close to that root area of the hibiscus. And then the same thing with some self-seeding cosmos. There's cosmos that have self-seeded and come up in front of other perennials that I know if they're allowed to stay there, not only will they cast a shade on the blooming perennials that are trying to come up behind them, but they will also create more seeds in that area and become more of a problem to compete with those perennials further in the season this year and possibly next year, because one or the other will have to suffer. When you have two plants together, competition is there no matter what, especially when they're sharing the same root zone for moisture and nutrients. That kind of care I pay attention to all year long, because something or other is going to suffer if I don't. So here's one right here. Here's a Cosmo. Right now, it looks really pretty, growing, through the path. However, it's creating competition for several plants. Early spring, I moved some verbena right here, and that's probably how the Cosmo seed got put over here, because it was over there by Cosmos, and I transplanted some verbena over here. But the Cosmos are behind the verbena over there. And if I let them grow here, they're going to interfere with this verbena establishing itself. Now I'm just going to cut it back, and I'm just going to move it to the other side where it cannot cast a shade on any of the other plants or create competition. One part is the shade, because there's a couple blooming annuals over on the other side of the path, like Angelonia, that it's going to create shade for if I let it stay here. That the other problem is the root zone for this Cosmo is more aggressive, but it's in the same area as the root zone for this verbena and these other zinnias. So they're just going to be at a disadvantage, but I want them to have the advantage. So that's why I'm removing the Cosmos. Not removing the Cosmos because I don't like them. This is sometimes clients have a very hard time with this choice. And so especially when it comes to clients who have been trying to grow flowers or create a garden for many years unsuccessfully and haven't had blooms, they have a huge emotional attachment to every bloom and flower that pops up, and they want to keep every volunteer. This verbena is a much higher value plant to protect than the Cosmo, and that's really what it comes down to, is which one's adding the most value. The verbena is a slower grower, but it's also an evergreen, because this is the homestead variety, and it takes much longer to get established. So we just don't want to create anything that's going to compete with that. It will probably rebound. If it suffers at all, it'll rebound around the time that these gladiolas are done. Now, it will probably lean over a little bit, and I'll have to keep it tidy, but I do think the contrast of orange cosmos against this dark first night ornamental fountain grass, I think that's going to be really pretty. The other thing that I got to make sure these cosmos don't jeopardize is sprinkler patterns. This one I'm just going to pull up because I really didn't want to disrupt the mazes. So you see all the mazes that came with this? I'm going to try to just let this be together, keep all this intact, and plant it somewhere where they could both possibly benefit the garden, because there is a couple places that I'm seeing it could work, especially where I've already moved mazes down to this side of the path. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right around here, but we'll see how it goes. And I'm still going to trim back a lot of these non-essential buds and blooms, as I'm going to go ahead and chop up the cosmos around areas that I'm okay with them coming up next year or later in the season. Keep that in mind if you don't have a bag and you're not going to dispose of your cuttings of the seeds, the self-seeders especially. Just keep in mind where you're dropping them and that you're okay with them potentially returning there. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this back to where I would if I just deadheaded it. And I'm taking off everything that creates stress, and that's every bloom that's open, bloom that is seeding already, and blooms that are about to open. And I'm only leaving some of the tightest buds that are there on the plant. That's it. And this way it has the highest chance of coming back. So any other cosmos that I need to dig up and move, I'm gonna try to relocate over here behind or along that purple fountain grass. And the cosmos can grow perfectly with the gladiolas. They will not compete whatsoever. They're airy enough to let the gladiolas get sun and do what they need to do without creating competition. Really not taking any special care. I'm just pulling them up because as far as I'm concerned, these are free plants. You know, even if they just have a 50% chance of making it, I'm okay with that. I also need to find a spot for this plumbago. But let me get these cosmos in the ground. And I will cut these back the same way as I did the others. And I'll drop those cuttings somewhere that I'm okay with them coming back. I think I've removed the biggest offenders of cosmos. Now, oh, perhaps not. There's a few right here that are in front of this dianthus, and the dianthus needs to not have any competition in order to thrive. So I'm pulling up any of those. Now, the zinnias won't create too much competition for the dianthus, and if they do, it's very easy to manage through the season. The cosmos can take over at such a fast rate that the dianthus could possibly be affected to the point of not coming back. Okay. So now, let's get to these zinnias, and I've been letting them all do their thing. But the ones that I'm going to pull up are the ones that are right here. They're too close and competing with the root zone, and I want the hibiscus to get sunlight from right here. So already that's a problem. I mean, it's literally growing in the crown of the hibiscus, so that's got to come out. And I'll still transplant this, but you see these little leaves right here coming off the hibiscus? They would never have a chance to come out if I don't remove the competition. So actually finding some unhealthiness under here, so I need to amend that a little bit, clean that out, and then make sure that gets watered in well. But I will move this, and I'm going to just snip this off to remove some of the stress, and I'll put this somewhere else. But this is an example of where just that little bit of room makes a huge difference for the hibiscus. And I'm just putting it, it's like 20 feet from where it was, in an area that I know doesn't create any competition for nearby plants. And then I think I'm going to try to get that gladioli to stand up and not hang on the angelonia, because I really want to give the angelonia an advantage, because The blooms from the Angelonia are going to benefit this garden for a longer period of time than the gladiolas are. Here's the after view. Those are the Cosmos. You know, they're not looking incredibly happy, but they should perk up just fine. There's another one down there. That was the first one that I moved because it was big and bold right here. But however, this Verbena needs the advantage right now. So the perennials need to be the priority, and that is why this homestead Verbena and the Angelonias are getting the preferential treatment over what plant gets moved and why. And these are the types of things that most home gardeners and homeowners or people who are trying to establish a garden over time, if you don't consider these issues, things start happening or declining and you don't understand why. And usually it leads to some type of insect or bug. And then what happens is the person goes to treating the insect or bug rather than the problem that invited that pest or disease to begin with. The term IPM, Integrated Pest Management, basically means practices that you are going to follow and continue to follow. These strategies are put in place to always give every plant the best advantage possible. And that is technically a part of IPM. A couple weeks ago, I moved these Cosmos over here in front of this purple fountain grass because they were just popping up on the wrong side of the garden, blocking other plants that need sunlight. But I'm happy with how this came out. And this is an example of when you need to just rearrange some annuals that are volunteers that come up every year on their own from seed. You don't have to get rid of them when they're growing in the wrong place. Just locate them to a place that they could actually benefit the surrounding area rather than create problems for the surrounding area. So I hope that you found this information helpful today and that you'll join me again next time on Garden Beauty. Be sure to leave any questions or suggestions in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you guys.